Okay, and I think Libby has something to say before we get started with the lecture.
I'll hand over to Peter first, and then hopefully, hopefully I'll join in afterwards.
Great, thanks very much. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to have you for our next Mooting lecture. I think things are really heating up. We've got lots of information being provided through the lectures, and now this week we have begun our workshops. Maybe some confusions for some of the schools that this week we have a lecture and the workshop, but please do watch out for the emails about scheduling of the workshops. They're a really, really great opportunity to begin to develop your practical skills for mooting. And last week, after the lecture, all of us got together in the moot courtroom in the Scrimgeour building, which you can see just behind me, and we filmed a mock moot. And that's currently been finalized by our videography team. And if we have time, we'll be able to share part of the draft of that video later this afternoon. And then later this week, we'll be able to circulate the full video. And this is a great, great video. The team prepared the moot that you'll be doing for the internal competition. So initially, we've got the full moot all the way through, excellent presentations from all of the instructors. I put them under pressure by asking them some questions, just as would happen in a proper moot. And then I give my judgment. But also, we had a bit of fun at the end of the proper moot, where Rory and Scarlett, they gave an example of some of the errors that can be made when you begin to moot. So we've got our blooper section at the end. So you'll see an enormous contrast between excellent mooting and mooting which is somewhat below par. And we thought we would do that, not just to have a bit of fun, but also to really highlight what you should not be doing. So you can see the huge contrast between best practice and practice which should be avoided. So I'll pass on now to Libby. She's going to do a bit more housekeeping, and then we'll hear from the team.
Many thanks, Peter. That's fantastic. Yes, as Professor Peter said just now, I think there may have been a little bit of confusion today because I sent an email reminder out to everybody to register for our lecture, which is happening now, yesterday. So a quick reminder, please, that you have two sets of things going on. You have the main lectures, which will happen on Wednesdays. And now we've started the workshops, and those are different for each school. So each school is set at a different time. Some schools are together, others are on their own. A quick reminder to everybody who hasn't yet had a workshop and is not sure, please make sure you get in touch with your teacher. We have sent those workshop meeting details on to every single teacher that is involved in this process. So please go and speak to your teacher if you haven't yet had that meeting. And as a school, if you haven't yet sent suitable times, then can I encourage you to do so as soon as possible so that we can try and schedule these in. It's always a great help to us if you can give us as many times that you're available as possible. We have a limited timetable, so trying to fit everybody in is always quite tricky. So that's it from me. The guys are going to be running the lecture today. I must get my terminology correct. This is a lecture, not a workshop. So over to you guys. I'm not quite sure what you have in mind, so I shall hand over.
Okay, so I'm just going to share the slides that we'll be using today. Okay, so today's lecture is on, oh wait, this is the wrong one. So, it's the right slides, it's just the wrong title. Yeah. So sorry. So it's actually, today's is oral presentation and speaking skills. So the learning aims are to be able to present yourself confidently and clearly, to understand how to introduce authorities within your submission, to be able to reply to judicial intervention, to identify points for rebuttal, and to be able to use your time effectively. Just a quick recap of mooting. Each team presents submissions to the judge and persuades them that their interpretation of the law is correct. Each moot has two teams competing against one another, and the winner is decided both on advocacy skills and also legal knowledge. During their arguments, students will be asked questions by the judge, so you'll also be judged on the answers that you come up with on the day. We know that you can't obviously prepare a lot for that, but it is a key skill in law and in mooting to be able to respond effectively to questions. So you have to know your argument inside and out. So here's just a bit about how it's marked. I've highlighted in blue the skills that we'll be covering today. So oral presentation, relevance of authorities, speaking skills and use of etiquette, response to questioning, and effectiveness of rebuttals and use of time. So we've kind of spoken a bit already about etiquette and oral presentation and how you hold yourself and speak and present to the judge. But some new things we'll be looking at today are effectiveness of rebuttals and also response to questions. So I'll just pass over to Louise.
So just for a quick recap on how to address the judge. So you must refer to the judge as my lord, my lady, your lordship, your ladyship. So an example of how you would refer the judge to the bundle, you'd say, if I could direct your ladyship to page 6 of the digital bundle. My lord, the submission of the appellants relates to. So these are just some good examples of how you'd speak in court. So it's really important to make sure you refer to the judge correctly. If you're not sure how the judge would like to be referred to, just ask them. It's better than getting it wrong. Okay, so for the presentation, it's really important that during your submission, you speak slowly and clearly. A good way to measure your speed is to watch the judge as they're taking notes. If they're writing really quickly, you may need to slow down, and because that's kind of an indication that the judge is not able to follow your argument. So it's also important to emphasize your important arguments. You can do this in the tone of your voice, how loud you're speaking. It's also important to make it clear when you're introducing a new point, rebutting, concluding, etc. So this will help the judge to understand where you are in your argument. So your body language is really important. So you should try and keep eye contact during the judge. It will be a bit harder to do online, but this does allow the judge to see that the counsel is paying attention to them. Another thing to try and avoid is fidgeting excessively, as this may distract your judge from your argument you're making, which is something you don't want to do. You want them to focus on what you're saying. And then also when you're in person, the counsel should not stray around the room. So this won't be so much of a problem for if you're online, but just a good thing to know. So when you're introducing yourself, the senior appellant should introduce the court and offer the facts of the case. So you should try and be brief when offering the facts of the case, but don't rush your speech. Just try to avoid that. So you should introduce yourself if you're the senior, also introduce your junior, and give your title, full name, not just your first name, as this is too informal. So for example, if I was being introduced, I'd be Miss Louise Kelly. You should reference the judge to your skeleton argument at the start of your moot, and then briefly explain your grounds or your appeal response, and you'll submit those grounds. This is to establish a roadmap of your argument so that the judge is aware of your structure and the main points that you'll be making during your submission.
So when you're introducing cases, you'll want to cite it correctly. We'll give you all of the cases you can use for the internals competition, but you'll want to say where it was reported. If you guys remember, we spoke about law reports a little while ago, and that's where each case is reported. So you'll want to tell the judge where it was reported, at what page and when, and then you'll also want to refer them to the bundle that you have as well. So the judge will usually nod or indicate that they've found the page. If they're taking a while, they're scrolling through or flicking through and they've not nodded, or they don't seem like they found the page, you can say, does your lordship, does your ladyship have sight? Try and avoid just saying where the case is and then straight away going, does your lordship have sight? Because they often don't have time to see it before you've even asked. A lot of the time you can offer the facts of the case to the judge. Judges vary about whether they want the facts or not. They might ask if they're relevant and why they're relevant. They may well be already familiar with the case with certain very famous cases. You can direct the judge to the page of the bundle where you'll quote from the judgment. And you should highlight that or indicate that in a different color to show them. And you should provide the judge the area of the judgment that of the case that you're going to be citing. So they know, they can see who said it, which judge has said it in a specific case, to make sure it's not part of the case report where a lawyer said it, not a judge. And then you will want to, when you conclude your submission, you'll want to summarize your arguments in the same way you did at the beginning of your submission. A lot of really good submissions are sometimes let down by having a small conclusion. Remember, if you're junior counsel, you're going to be concluding not just for yourself, but for your entire side. So you need to make sure that conclusion is strong and you've illustrated all the points you've just put forward. If you're the junior respondent, then you're going to be concluding the entire moot. You want to make sure you have the best word, you've put the last word in. When you're at the end of your submission, don't just sit down, thank the judge, ensure they have no further questions. You may say something like, if the court has no further questions, I will conclude my submission. And the judge will nod or maybe say, sorry, if you could just answer this or clear this up for me, depending on your submission. But make sure you have a very strong conclusion, as that will tie the whole argument together. So each mooter will have 7 minutes to give their submission to the court. And that seems like a long time at first, but when you're there, it really doesn't. And when you realize all of the things you have to do and all of the things you have to argue, it'll fly by. So the clerk will inform each mooter when they reach different times of their moot. So if the clerk holds up a sign that says 2 minutes, that means that there are 2 minutes left, 1 minute, 1 minute left, 1 minute left, and they should begin their conclusion. If the clerk holds up a sign that says time, that will mean the 7 minutes has ended and the mooter should finish their submission. As we said before, don't just sit down after you run out of time. You may say to the judge, it appears I have run out of time, my lord, but if it pleases your lordship, I will conclude my submission briefly. And they may say yes, they may say no, that's enough, sit down. But make sure you don't just sit down after the time limit has gone. Judicial intervention is included in the time. So when you're writing your submission and rehearsing your submission, remember that it might actually go on for a little bit longer because you'll get questions from the judge. So leave sufficient time for questions by the judge. Leave a minute or two. Sometimes judges who've taken up loads of time with your questions might let you go on for a little bit longer, but don't bank on that either. Make sure that in your speech and your bundle, you are only using relevant authorities. There's no point using an authority that has no relevance or very weak relevance to the present case, because you only have 7 minutes. There's no point wasting time with it and not constructing your argument around it. Don't speak too fast during your moot. That is what we can say all the time. It's very easy to feel nervous and then let your words run away from you. Make sure that you're not speaking too fast, but equally try not to speak too slowly. It can be, if you're nervous, these things can be really hard to keep on top of, but just try and speak at a normal pace and you can tend to tell whether the judge is understanding you or not. And just keep it, remember it's a conversation with the judge. It's not a speech with questions in it. It's a conversation, and just speak at a conversational pace. And make sure when you're providing the facts of the case, you are only choosing relevant facts. There's no point giving a 3-minute summary of a case when it's only persuasive and has very little relevance. Make sure you pick what you say carefully. All of a background of a case could be finished within the 7 minutes. So make sure you're picking what you say carefully and only picking the relevant fact. And finally, as it says here, don't assume that the judge will let you go over the time limit. A lot of judges won't. So make sure you just remember you want all the important points within the 7 minutes. And although it might seem like a long time, it's such a short time when you are actually speaking.
So now we're going to cover judicial intervention. So when the judge asks you a question, it is important for you to remain calm and think about your response. The judge isn't trying to catch you out or argue with you, and as they're simply wanting to test how well you know your argument and whether you can think on your feet. What you often find is the better you do during your submission, the more difficult the questions will be, because the judge will be trying to test you more and more and more. So for example, a mooter who's maybe not got the best of speech, they may have quite easy questions asked by the judge, compared to a mooter who is doing a fantastic speech. The judge might be doing quite complex questions to let them have the opportunity to gain more and more marks. When you're responding to judicial intervention, make sure you keep your pace slow and make sure your etiquette remains formal. A lot of the time what we see is students and mooters who are doing perfect speeches, they're doing a perfect submission because they've rehearsed it over and over and over again. And then immediately the judge asks them a question, they drop the formality, and they might go into quite casual language. So thinking, if, for example, if I, the judge, asked junior counsel, why is the case of Donoghue and Stevenson relevant to this court? If a mooter may answer it very well, or they may answer it saying, well, I think, or I believe, you know, and they drop their formality, and it results in, you know, them losing the courtroom etiquette and marks. So judicial intervention, when they ask you questions, yes, it goes towards your judicial intervention marks, but it can also go towards your courtroom conduct. If you don't understand the question, you can ask the judge to rephrase it, but be very careful how you ask the judge to rephrase it. So don't go, I don't understand the question. Can you repeat it again, please? What you may want to go is, my lord, my lady, would it be possible if you could rephrase the question? It's again just showing respect to the judge, and the judge will understand perhaps they have you know, phrased the question in the wrong way or in a more complex way than it needs to be, but you need to show that respect to them. If you are really struggling, you can ask to consult with your partner. We only recommend this if you truly are struggling, because a moot is supposed to be your own conversation with the judge. It's not supposed to be you and your partner's conversation. A tip I always learned at uni was, if I got asked a question, I would take a sip of water. It gives you a moment to think of your response and then to say your response after that. So that's a trick we've always taught at Dundee, is just, you know, the other thing which is important is, don't just feel the need to immediately say your answer. So let's say the judge asks you a really complex question. Don't feel pressured to go, well, my lord, I immediately believe, you know, and get all confused. Just take a moment, take a sip of water, to have a think, and then go to his lordship or her ladyship and answer the question then. And again, just at the bottom, there's 2 examples of what you can do. If you're asking the judge to rephrase the question, you can go, my lady, please may you rephrase the question, or you could say, excuse me, my lord, I wish to consult with my senior learner on this point. So rebuttal. So we talked a little bit about rebuttal last week. This is a really important part of the moot, and it's often where you can get a lot of marks on the day. And what a rebuttal is during a moot, both sides are expected to respond to the submissions made by the opposing side through rebuttal. And while it's not practical for the junior appellant to do so, each other mooter should aim to cover rebuttal in their submission. Now, the reason it's not practical for the junior appellant, if you remember, is because they are, it should be senior appellant for England, but the first speaker is the one who, they won't have a chance to hear the other side's arguments, but every speaker after them will have the opportunity to rebut the arguments. Teams should research the opposing side's arguments in order to prepare for rebuttal during the moot and to advance their own case. So to remember, you are given the opposition's bundle before the moot begins. So what that means is you'll get the bundle, you'll get the skeleton's argument, and you can review it. You can look and say, okay, they're using the case of Donoghue and Stevenson, right, so why are they using that? Oh, maybe they're using it for the neighbourhood principle, maybe they're using it for duty of care. What cases go against this? How can we rebut this argument? So it's about doing preparation beforehand. In order to show teamwork, teams can write down the points of rebuttal which they think of during the moot and pass them to the partner. This shows the judge that you are a team player. Now, this is a little bit different for online competitions because the judge won't necessarily be able to see that you're writing together, or you might not be sitting with one another. You could be on different computers, different screens. But again, if you just demonstrate that you've had a conversation with your partner beforehand and you have a similar argument, you know what each other's arguments are, and that will show teamwork skills. What I would say, it's quite important, let's say if you are doing a moot and you're sitting with your partner, again, courtroom etiquette is really important. So don't think you can immediately go, if it's not your turn to speak and it's the opposition is speaking, don't think you can turn around and go, oh, Scarlett, should you do this, should you do that? A moot is all about being quiet and just watching. So don't interrupt and be respectful to the opposing side. So once you have received your opponent's skeleton arguments, you should research the authorities. So again, just you get the bundle, you get the skeleton argument. It's really important to prepare. It's really important to research, and you're trying to show the weakness of their argument. Now, the opposition may, on the day of the moot, come up with an argument or say an argument which they've not referenced in the bundle or their skeleton argument. If you're able to, on the spot, come up with a rebuttal to this will get you brownie points with the judge because you're showing you're able to think quickly and you're able to create a strong argument. So an example of rebuttal structure would be, in the event that the landed oppositions argue, the appellant respondent shall argue in response that ... If you, during the moot itself, let's say I am the junior respondent and I'm wanting to rebut the argument that the person before me submitted, I could go, my lord, with the court's permission, I would submit these arguments in response to my learned friend's submission that, etc. So, showing that you've allocated some time to do your rebuttal. So we're now going to go over some key terminology. So these are some terminology that we've had feedback on and with people a little bit confused on what they mean. So again, a moot, that's a mock appellate trial on a disputed point of law. The authorities, these are the cases, legislation, and other legal sources used to back up a legal argument. And all your authorities will need to be in your bundle, and you'll get a set limit of how many authorities you can use. So I think we'll come up with the rule. We'll be giving you the rules very soon. But if, for example, we say you're allowed 5 authorities, that includes case law and legislation. You can't, for example, have 5 different types of case law and then 3 different legislation statutes. It's together, they have to equal 5. Your rebuttal, that's where your counsel may submit an argument which directly contradicts or undermines the opponent's opposition's argument, which we just covered. The counsel, these are the barristers, lawyers acting in a moot, so junior counsel, senior counsel. The judicial intervention, again, these are just the questions asked by the judge. The bundle, that's a prepared document, a folder of all authorities that the counsel intends to use with the relevant sections highlighted. The appellant, this is the appealing party who is arguing that the decision should be overturned. The respondent, this is the responding party who is arguing the decision was correct at first instance. The judge at first instance, this is the judge who presided over the court where the initial decision was made. So in the example of the moot that we did last week, I think the judge, his name was Judge Oopsies, and the counsel may argue that the judge's decision was correct or incorrect. What's really important though to make sure is if you are arguing the judge at first instance was wrong, you still need to be respectful about that. You still need to respect the judge at first instance. So you can argue that he was wrong in his decision, but again, just continue to show the respect, continue to get those courtroom etiquette points. And finally, the submission, this simply means the speech that you give to the judge and the court.
So I think we finished a bit early today in hopes to show you the video, but also answer any questions that you have. So I've seen a Q&A come through that says, is disclosure required for mooting? While it is, we don't call it disclosure. Disclosure is, correct me if I'm wrong, I only know it in a criminal law sense. in a trial of first instance. We do have it, we just don't call it disclosure. It's just swapping authorities or swapping bundles, and that. So yeah, you do need to let the other side know what your authorities are, what your argument is in terms of the bundle or skeleton argument beforehand, and we'll let you know in the rules how far in advance that needs to be.
Are there any more questions that we didn't cover about this week's lecture, or any of the other ones that we can answer while we're here? Because I know we've got a bit of time. I believe all of the PowerPoints, correct me if I'm wrong, have been circulated from the earlier weeks.
I tell you what I can do though, actually, is what I'll do is when I send the recording out to everybody this week, I will send on all of the presentations for all of the lectures this week, so you all have a chance to recap and look over and have that visual reference if you need it.
Well, if there are no further questions, what I can do now is to show a little snippet from the video. So I will begin, and the team have not seen this video yet, so they're looking a bit apprehensive. So I'll begin with some of the introductions that were done properly, and then I'll skip over and show some of Rory and Scarlett's star performance of how not to do a moot. So Libby, I need you to allow screen sharing. Okay, great. Still can't share my screen, Libby.
I can't seem to make you a co-host. Kelsey, would you be able to have a look and see whether you can do that, or Rory, if you can do that? Because I
the host, so we see what that does.
Okay.
Oh, I'm the host now. Fantastic. Right.
In the case of Jason and the Blue Shoe Company Limited, who appears?
Good afternoon, my lord. My name is Rory Gilchrist, and I appear today as senior appellant, with my learned colleague, Miss Kelsey Laird, appearing as junior appellant. My learned friends across the bar are Miss Scarlett Wilson, appearing as junior respondent, and Miss Louise Kelly as senior respondent. It is submitted to the court on behalf of the appellants that there are two grounds of appeal as outlined in the skeleton argument provided. The first being that the Court of First Instance erred in refusing the action, as there was in fact an existing duty of care in accordance with Lord Aitken's judgment in Donoghue against Stevenson. Secondly, the appellant submits that the risk of injury was foreseeable, therefore the damages sought are not too remote. I will be addressing the first point of the appeal regarding Donoghue against Stevenson and the neighbourhood doctrine, while my learned senior, Miss Laird, will be covering the second point of the appeal. If it pleases your lordship, I shall begin my submission.
Please do.
Would your lordship care for a summary of the present case before the court?
A very, very brief summary, please.
Of course, my lord. The appellant was gifted by his girlfriend a pair of Blue Eagle trainers manufactured by the respondent. The Blue Shop Company Limited. The appellant's girlfriend made the purchase at Sneaker Stop, a third party. The appellant wore the shoes at the Crazy Night Bar later that evening, where the shoe's metal wire ripped out of the frame and pierced his foot, which resulted in his left foot being badly infected. As a result of this piercing, the appellant was informed by his doctor that he had contracted sepsis and was required to take 4 weeks off work due to his injury. Since the Blue Eagle trainers were launched, a further 5 individuals have been injured while wearing them. My Lord, my first ground of submission will be in regard to the duty of care established by Lord Aitken in Donoghue against Stevenson. If I may direct your Lordship to the binding case of Donoghue against Stevenson, heard in the House of Lords in 1932, reported in UK House of Lords, which is located in tab 1, page 4 of the bundle provided. Does my Lord have sight?
I do. Before you take me to the facts of that case, you said that case is binding on us today, but I see it's a Scottish case, and this is an English court. How is it binding on us?
Thank you, my Lord. The case is binding on the court appearing before us, as it was held in the House of Lords, which is the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Would your Lordship care for a synopsis of the Donoghue against Stevenson case?
Very brief.
Of course, my Lord. The events of the case took place in Paisley, Scotland in 1928. While attending a store, Miss May Donoghue was given a bottle of ginger beer, purchased for her by a friend. The bottle was later discovered to contain a decomposing snail. Since the bottle was not made of clear glass, Donoghue consumed most of its contents before she became aware that it contained a snail. She later fell ill, and the physician diagnosed her with gastroenteritis. If I could now refer your Lordship to the dictum of Lord Aitken at tab 1, where he rules, "Whom then in law is my neighbour?" The answer seems to be persons who are so closely and directly affected by my act that I ought reasonably to have them in my contemplation as being so affected when I am directing my mind to the acts or omissions which are called into question. My Lord, I submit Lord Aitken's doctrine applies directly in the present case before this court. In Donoghue, the appellant did not purchase the bottle of ginger beer, but was rather gifted it from her friend, who did not purchase it directly from the respondent, but instead a third party. Despite this, Lord Aitken held that the respondent held a duty of care to the appellant through the neighbourhood principle. It is submitted, your Lordship, that this applies directly in the present case. The respondent held a duty of care to the appellant, and this duty was broken by the appellant's injury. It is for these reasons, my Lord, and those submitted by my learned junior, that the appellant submit that the appeal should be allowed. Thank you, my Lord. If there are no further questions, that concludes my submission.
Just one question on Donoghue and Stevenson. Was it a unanimous judgment of the House of Lords?
It was not unanimous, my Lord, no. But it was by majority.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll just pause there. We're not going to run through the whole video, but there you can see a wonderful introduction by Rory presenting his case. Now, by way of comparison, I'm going to scan forward and see where, after everybody else is finished, Rory and Scarlett gave a non-exemplary approach. So I can see Rory and Scarlett both on the screen. Who would prefer to show their inappropriate?
I'll go because we've just heard my wonderful speech.
Yeah,
so you'll
it's
hear
a
the
good
less
comparison
good
to hear
comparison.
from Rory again.
Your Honour, my name is Rory, and I appear today as senior appellant with my learned colleague Kelsey appearing as junior, and across over there is Scarlett appearing as the junior respondent and Louise as senior respondent. It is submitted today that on behalf of our side, there are 2 grounds of appeal as outlined in the document we sent. The first being the court which this case appeared beforehand was wrong to refuse action because there was duty of care, if I said that right, yeah. And this was shown by Lord Aitken in Stevenson and Donoghue. The appellant also submits that injury was seen because damages are not remote. Kelsey will be covering the second point and I'll be covering the first point. If it pleases my lordship, I will start my argument.
I think you can stop there. Thank you.
So that gives you a little bit of the flavour of how to do a moot. And then you can see, thanks to Rory, who's a great sport, possibly, well, definitely not the way in which to do a moot. Far too informal, using inappropriate terminology, really not inspiring confidence in the part of the court that he really had mastered his brief, that he knew what to do, and he knew what, he didn't clearly know how to present a case before the moot court. We've got a full 30 minutes of video on that. We go through the full moot with all 4 instructors doing really well at the beginning. And then we have Rory and Scarlett, who as I said before, have fun in showing how not to do it. And wait to see Scarlett's presentation. It really is a treat at the end of how not to do a moot. Just think of a sheet of paper and hide behind it and speak as fast as you possibly can. I've never heard anybody speak as quickly as Scarlett did. And I come from Northern Ireland and we speak very quickly. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions. Or I'll ask the team if they want to say anything about the video or about what happens next.
I just wanted to, this isn't about the video, but I just wanted to clear up, we had a couple of questions, Kelsey and I, in the workshops we were doing that were related to the internals competition. There'll be one internals competition and there will be junior and senior counsel. I know there's a bit of confusion about maybe 2 internals competitions, but that will not be the case. Someone has asked in the chat, does the moot have to be based on case law? Not necessarily, it can be based on legislation or statute, but you will use cases to back that up because you're saying this is how the law's been applied before, we think it should be applied like this right now. So I would always recommend using cases because it just shows how the court has approached a case like the one you're dealing with. I don't think I have anything else to say, if there's anything else clear up, unless anyone else does. Kelsey or Louise?
No, I think that's it. So for those of you who haven't had their workshops, what we're going to do is go over the moot problem that we showed last week and the one that we used in the video. We'll just kind of talk you through how we would attack it, how we would divide it between ourselves in terms of workload, and what kind of key arguments already jump out at us that we would want to use in the moot. And then we'll be circulating the moot problem that will be your internals problem at the end of this week. And hopefully you'll have some time to prepare answers similar to what we did in the workshop and then come back for the second workshop and we can sort of make sure you're on the right track for internals.
Can I just chip in here and really encourage everybody to get stuck into the workshop? So that is your opportunity to have that sort of discursive and very interactive session with your tutors. It is your opportunity to ask questions and to really get involved. So please make sure you make the most of those workshops. So hopefully you'll feel comfortable because they're small groups, to unmute yourself, to put your cameras on and really get involved in a big way.
We've just had one more question in the chat about whether a moot can be on criminal law. Any moot can be on any area of law, but these next couple of problems we have for you, or this one we're dealing with at the moment, is not based on criminal law. But a moot could be on criminal law, but we're focusing mainly on duty of care and tort law at the minute. But as we go through with you over the next couple of months and we go through different problems with you, that is definitely something that could come up.
And just to say that you have the textbooks to rely upon that we sent out to all the schools. So if you do want to do some extra reading on tort law, you've got the textbook. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll draw this lecture to a close. Thank you all very much to to those of you who've joined synchronously. For those of you watching later, we look forward to seeing you at the workshops if you've not met already, and we'll be back again very soon with our next lecture. So thanks very much and have a great day.